Hi, Franco Cavallari here, and just want to deliver another segment based on requests about curcumin and turmeric and how it relates to BDM30 and what's the difference. And I think this is a much needed discussion based on the questions we're getting. You know, what's the difference between turmeric and curcumin? And then, how is curcumin BDM30, our new technology, different from regular curcumin? So let's see if we can pull this off and answer the questions that I've seen come through on my emails. A little bit about me there, if you guys want to stop on that and get a chance to look at my background. I've been 30 years in this industry, biomedical researcher and former IFBB bodybuilder many years ago, actually 25 years ago. So there's my conflict of interest statement, just stating that, you know, I'm the owner of various patents related to these compounds, and so you should be aware of that as I deliver my science, which is not biased, but theoretically could be. So let's talk about curcumin and turmeric. Typically, turmeric, the spice that's used in a lot of culinary applications, is about 3 to 6% curcumin. And we've heard about curcumin having anti-inflammatory properties, and it's actually, you know, a pretty good product to use for a lot of mild inflammatory conditions, and works reasonably well for the average condition that, again, is not too significant. Any conditions that involve that may involve mutations and diseases such as autoimmune conditions, and auto-inflammatory conditions, you know. In terms of autoimmune conditions, some may be, say, good examples would be lupus, Crohn's disease, colitis, rheumatoid arthritis, and a lot of these autoimmune conditions are related to various mutations that may contribute to the condition. So they require a much more significant or potent pharmacology to treat them. And you know, typically curcumin extracts won't have an effective result to treat these conditions, simply because they require a more potent activity. So again, turmeric powder, the spice, only has between 3 and 6% curcumin in it. And that's why we don't see much anti-inflammatory activity from turmeric. But when we take curcumin and break it out or extract it from turmeric, we can actually extract it to concentrations that range between, as we see here, 60% to 95%. So we've typically seen, you know, in the marketplace, curcumin 95. So it means that the curcumin that typically exists in turmeric at 3 to 6% has been extracted out. So now I have this pure curcumin. And the pure curcumin at 95% curcumin, what people don't realize, is made up of subfractions or constituents. And if you look here, this 95% curcumin extract that's pulled out of turmeric contains curcumin 1, or diethylmethane, dis-methoxycurcumin, which is curcumin 2, and bis-dimethoxycurcumin, curcumin 3. So it has 3 curcuminoids built into the curcumin 95. And the challenge is that from one curcumin 95 product to another, these curcuminoids can fluctuate in concentration. And this is where standardization is lacked. Even in this product, when you think you're getting the same curcumin 95 day in and day out every time you buy that product, it's not the same, because these can actually fluctuate. Now, typically, curcumin 3 only exists at around 0.2, 0.5 to a maximum of 2% in most curcuminoids. And so it doesn't typically participate in the pharmacology of curcumin 95. So it doesn't really have any effect. Now, my research into curcuminoids has discovered a novel activity, because what I've done, based on my history, based on my past, based on treating colitis in the past for me, because I have severe ulcerative colitis, I found that when I took curcumin 95 to take the edge off the disease in the past, and this is decades ago, that from product to product, it wasn't consistent. It didn't work consistently. And at the time, I chalked it up to, you know, the disease has many variables that contribute to its activity. So the environment, your diet, your state of mind, all these things affect how the disease plays out in terms of its pathology and the symptoms. So curcumin worked for me sometimes and sometimes not. But I began to map the concentration of each of these curcumins in the certificates of analysis, from the certificates of analysis of each curcumin 95, and realized that those which had the curcumin 3 levels that were higher than typical seemed to work a little better. So I began on a journey a couple of decades ago to extract the 3 curcuminoids separately, isolate them, and utilize them myself individually, and found early on, and I can tell you the details of my story in another video, but early on that curcumin 3 in full concentration usually resolved the symptoms of my disease. Now, it doesn't mean that I cured my disease, because this ulcerative colitis is a function of so many, it's what you would call a multigenic disease, multiple genes, multiple variants in the environment contributing to triggers, and it's an autoimmune disease that you have the antibodies that affect and target your own tissues, primarily the large intestine with colitis. But this compound was effective enough in full concentration to alleviate the symptoms. And there began my journey into medicine, and to study the pharmacology of each of these 3 curcuminoids individually and isolated to determine their activity. I've got a picture here of a cell because I'm going to show you in a moment how their activity functions in relation to the extracellular medium, the plasma membrane, the cytosol, and then the nucleus where our genes are housed. It actually penetrates, this curcumin 3 penetrates its activity to the nuclear level to affect how your genes work, how your genes respond to the synthesis, and in particular the terminology used here, the transactivation of various transcription factors, and how they end up producing various cytokines that are involved in inflammatory response. So all your inflammatory response, immune system activation, inflammatory regulation occurs at this nuclear level, with each cell then sending out cytokines or interleukin 1, 2, 3, 4, 8. All these interleukins represent signaling proteins that beacon the immune system and affect the entire area around this cell to bring it in alignment with an inflammatory response or an immune system response. So my study then focused on these 3 curcuminoids, and as you can see, they vary distinctly and significantly inside that curcumin extract. So if you buy a curcumin 95 extract today and it has this proportion at 50, 10.2, next time it could have a 78, 20.2. That would still line up to almost 100. How's it going to work the next time? What would happen if you have maybe a 3% here, a 10% here, and a 70% here? How does that affect the pharmacology of that curcumin 95? It's different again every time. If these 3 have common activity in the cell, but also each of them has distinct activity that's different from the other, and I'll show you what that means in a moment, because that sounds a bit like an oxymoron, but it's not in the context of the pharmacology of these compounds, then every time this proportion changes, the overall pharmacology of curcumin 95 changes. This is what I mean. Let's look at this. This may look a bit foreign to a lot of people, but this is ultimately the summarization of my results with one of the proteins. I studied many proteins in the cell, and this would be, say, MSK1, for example, in the cytosol, which would be outside the nucleus, and MSK1 in the nucleus, inside the nucleus. So I can measure the MSK1, this protein, here and here separately by separating the nucleus and the cytosol of a whole bunch of cells and in tissues that we're studying. Pretty neat stuff. I can go over that one day and actually discuss how we do that in the lab, but it's a formidable procedure. So the bottom line here, if we just look at this side, the total MSK protein inside the nucleus we see with curcumin 3 treatment with curcumin 3 comes right down to almost 0, versus what we see with curcumin 1 and curcumin 2. And you can see here with regular curcumin extract, it comes down to about here. So when we're talking about an anti-inflammatory effect that's related to the activity of MSK1, for example, we can see that curcumin 3 has a much more profound effect, both in the cytosol, because this is the cytosol representing the cytosol here, and the nucleus, where here we have the nuclear effect. So I don't want to go into these details and hold your attention there, but let's go more profoundly in terms of the outcome and what this means. Because if we look at this slide, you know, we have the cytosol here and we have the nucleus here. We have transcription factors and here's MSK1. Transcription factors are involved in actually engaging your genes to produce these cytokines that produce this inflammatory response. And so what happens is curcumin 1, 2, and 3, all three curcuminoids, can slow down the translocation for the mechanisms of which I'm not going to go into right now, of this NF-kappa B, which is a transcription factor. And what it means is this NF-kappa B, P65, P50, actually enters the nucleus, nucleotranslocates, and binds to your gene, the promoter of the gene, to transactivate and in a transactivation process to produce cytokines that elicit an inflammatory response. And if curcumin 1, 2, and 3 can slow this down, then regular curcumin has the ability to mildly affect and reduce inflammation. But it cannot limit it the way curcumin 3 can if you used it at very high concentrations. Because curcumin 3, right here, is the only one, whoa, running low. Curcumin 3 is the only one that inhibits MSK1. And MSK1 activates NF-kappa B. So it doesn't matter how much of this you get in there. MSK1 is one of the special proteins called a kinase that activates this transcription factor. So without it, it cannot really do its job here. So you can see with curcumin 3, you can slow down the translocation of this NF-kappa B to mildly affect inflammation. But you can profoundly affect inflammation by inhibiting this MSK1. And very cool thing is that MSK1 is also escalated in a lot of diseases that are not responsive to various drugs, some of which are quite profound, autoimmune conditions included. And so when we affect or inhibit or slow down or limit the availability of MSK1 in the nucleus, plus slow down the availability or the translocation of this transcription factor at the same time, we improve the anti-inflammatory effect of the product significantly over regular curcumin. In addition, our research is showing that the ORAC value for curcumin 3, which we can produce and put into a formula at very high concentrations, is very high, much higher than regular curcumin 95, which is only 4,500, but curcumin BDM30 is 565,000 versus 4,500 for regular curcumin. So you can see there's a profound difference here. So supplement facts, if you look at the supplement facts panel of BDM30, you see curcumin, 51% for curcumin 1, 13 to 14% for curcumin 2, and 30% for curcumin 3. And if you compare the two, you see the difference. Here you only have 0.5 to 1.5% versus 30% for curcumin 3, giving you a more profound effect when it comes to anti-inflammatory activity. 60 times more BDMC to deliver that MSK1 inhibition and a more profound anti-inflammatory activity. Here are a couple products in the marketplace that utilize the BDM30 technology. Curcumin BDMC by Reset Bio and by Heighten Pure Recovery. BDM30, very powerful technology that changes the game when it comes to curcumin.